you know at the start of the season that somebody from the strike team would die? I mean, did you set out, okay, this is the plan?
The writers and I started talking about what we wanted the season to be about. And we talked about, I challenged them to, in a fifth season, not to save anything. I talked about the idea that I didn't want to try to artificially preserve the show, that we should use every ounce of story we could tell, and that I felt it was time for some kind of price to be paid by this unit of men who've sort of done a lot of good, but also done a lot of bad. And we bandied about what that would be, and we came up with what we felt was a pretty tragic story about a guy who's caught and trying to do the right thing and trying not to betray his friends. And we talked about miscommunication and mistaken notions and how this might happen. And we came up with this. So we knew as far back in July of last year that we would probably do it. So intellectually, I had in my head that we would do that. But emotionally, I didn't commit to it for a long time because I really love Kenny Johnson as an actor and as a person. And I knew that it would, as great story-wise as it would be, I knew it would be tough on him. I knew we'd be crossing a threshold that we hadn't crossed before, sort of losing one of our original, founding members on the show. So it took me to about right before the Christmas break in December when I finally turned to the writers and said, okay, we're going to do this. Even though we had been planning all the episodes for it, I always would say, well, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't, but let's keep moving towards it. And it finally got to a point where I just had to say, yeah, we're going to do it. So
you concluded pretty quickly that Kenny was your man. I mean, it was Lem.
Well, that's the story that we came up with. In the previous season, he was the one who had gotten caught with the heroin. He's the one who had the heroin in the thing. And even going back that previous season, we had Amolia see it, and we set up a whole IED thing. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do with it, but we knew it was going to lead to trouble. So he was the candidate to sort of really be the one stuck in the vice. Between his friends and comrades and between this new character, Lieutenant Kavanaugh. So it just happened that way. It wasn't that we sort of spun a wheel or didn't like him more than we liked anyone else. It's just the way the story broke.
When did you guys learn that he was the guy?
Well, I guess it was pretty shortly after Shawn had made the final decision. And, Shawn called me and we talked about it. And I think my first initial sort of emotional response was, oh no, we can't do this, But that was coming from a friendship standpoint, because we become very tight. Particularly, all of us is a very familial situation and set. But particularly, I'd have to say, Kenny and Walton and I have become very, very tight friends. Long after The Shield is over, these guys are like uncles to my children. We're very, very close. So I had an emotional response, but the interesting thing was I called Kenny. And Kenny had known before me, and he had had a couple of days to absorb it, or a little while. And the interesting thing was, when we talked about it from an artistic standpoint, we couldn't deny the genius in it, because if there was anyone in the cast that was the conscience of this team, and that it would create the greatest emotional impact certainly for Vic Mackey, it would be Kenny's character of Lemonhead. And the fact that it was based on a series of misunderstandings was so sort of Shakespearean that we thought, oh my God, as hard as this is going to be to do, we really have to do it.
And Shawn, you had him still alive for a couple seconds there. What was your point?
Well, that was something that one of our sicker minds on the writing staff, Kurt Sutter, devised and really fought for, was that Shane should have to come face to face with him in those last breathing moments. And even though nothing was sort of said, it was important to Kurt, and I ended up agreeing with him. It was a messy death. One of the reasons, we talked a lot about how he would do it, and Vic had shot Terry in the pilot, and there was some discussion about whether this should be a callback to that or not. We had this whole grenade story that was going in and out, and we put that grenade story into the Kavanaugh episode, the episode that focused on Kavanaugh, knowing that we were going to get to this point, because I always it felt like a cowardly way to kill somebody to me. It wasn't the personal thing that Vic had done with Terry, where it's just right there, it's dropping something and then you have your back to the guy and you're 30 feet away when it happens. And that's why I wanted to play it. So it was a tough thing, and I was there for the filming of it, and to see Kenny walk out on the set with with that makeup your heart broke.
Yeah. You were there. You were obviously all there. Was that your final night of shooting, by the way?
Yes.
So you're obviously all there. I mean, tell me about it. What was it like? And
It was just an incredibly intense night. And, again, we're very familial. We're a tight group. And it was almost as if we were really experiencing a death because we knew that Kenny would no longer be on the show. And, you get pretty used to having KJ on set, and he's such a light and a personality and just a great friend and a comrade. And, it was just heavy, it was thick, and it was the last night of that particular set of episodes, so we were going on a hiatus. And not that we don't have intense nights on the show.
But it was, because when I read it, I was really thrown off. I mean, I was away in Mexico, I think.
You're filming a movie there.
Yeah, and I read the script, and I was like, oh my God, I sat down, because I couldn't believe it. I was like, when I realized that Walton was killing him, and it really threw me off, and I wasn't expecting to feel that way, because, see, when I started on the show, he was the first person I worked with, and he kind of invited me in a way. It was real generous and open, and we were talking and sitting there, and so I not knowing him like you guys do, but just the whole thing, it just, I got a chance to get to know him, and I think of him as a friend too, and it was intense. I was thrown. I was really surprised.
Forrest, let's go back to the setup of your character. I mean, what brought you to this show in the first place? I don't know how else to describe it, but you're just one scary son of a bitch. And I mean, how was it described to you? How was the role offered to you? What did they tell you?
Well, I met with Shawn, and he described it to me. We were in a restaurant, and he was talking about the character was going to be the biggest threat that Mackie had, and that slowly, by trying to capture him, he was going to start to become him in a way. And that's how it happened. The conversation, how it all started off.
Yeah, there wasn't a real second choice that I was excited about. So I went to that lunch, saying I'm going to get Forrest Whitaker because there really wasn't a plan B that appealed to me. And we talked a lot, and I think he's been very generous because I think a lot of that character is on the page, but really what he brought to it that I didn't anticipate was an intensity and zeal to this guy's quest, a righteousness to what he was pursuing that wasn't on the page that much, and that I think elevated the character. I think the writing for that character was an 8, and I think his acting brought it up to a 10. And Michael was very kind with his words about the writing of the show, and I take a great deal of pride in the writing, but it's really the first show that I've worked on where, to me, the episodes eclipse the scripts, and in other shows, you're very proud of a script, and then little things along the way sort of chip away at what your vision was, and you're sort of left with going, well, it could have been worse, I guess. And this show, as proud as I am of the scripts, the episodes always turn out better than just the scripts, and it's a credit to all the actors, especially these two guys and the crew and everything. So he really added a ton of just zeal. It's sort of, it was the 3rd or 4th episode that I was editing with him where I realized it was like, well, this guy's like Inspector Javert, in Les Mis in terms of, this look in his eye. And then I saw him do an interview. It was like on Jimmy Kimmel maybe or something. And they were talking about, when you're doing the show and you're like, I'm going to get Vic Mackey. It was like the character was on Jimmy Kimmel, just sort of swearing this blood oath that he was going to get this guy and do everything. And I was just watching, going, this guy has committed, and he's sort of elevated above
Can I say
what
something?
we even imagined.
When I was directing episode 6, I think it was Shawn and I were in the tone meeting during episode 5, and I think we referred to it as the forest of it all.
And embrace the forest of it all.
Embrace the forest of it all. And it was about what Forrest was bringing to this character and this incredible intensity. I think something that was absolutely genius on the part of the writers was that I don't think that we actually spoke until the 3rd episode.
Yeah.
Right at the end of the 3rd episode.
Right at the that was like that scene, the scene in the clip where we met is in the last scene of the 3rd episode, and there's all this build up and tension.
But you know about him, you know he's trying to get you, you
and
know that
we're
he's got
fully
claws
aware
in
of
the
each other,
lamb.
right? It's all this build up.
Yeah.
And just from the moment, the thing is, we got along so famously, but they kept us away from each other, and we would generally meet as our characters. And with,
Which is the way it should be done,
what
correct?
loathing. It was just two people just wanting to eat each other's throats out. It was just, that kind of palpable feeling throughout this season. And from an acting, there's very few actors I've ever worked with who have as powerful a presence as Forrest. And it was just, for me, it was intense while it was happening, but it was always a joy because I'd walk away from it and go, wow, that was fun.
Well, Forrest, your character prompted this question. Since you play a bad guy on the show, have you ever been confronted as your character on the street?
Huh?
Have you ever?
Have I what?
Have you ever been confronted as your character? Do people assume?
People really, because his performance is so strong and people love Michael's performance, people take such personal, it's a affront to them that I'm after him. I like when you say that, there's still a little door in my head that I'm counting on. So when you say a bag, I'm like, whoa.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Everybody thinks I'm
No, I started realizing that during the season. I mean, he's an internal affairs guy who's trying to put a cop away who killed another cop.
I think we
And so why is he described as a bad guy?
Well,
Yeah.
somebody asked Forrest, you played a sadistic character. Sadistic. I don't know about sadistic, but nevertheless, how were you able to smile so sadistically and feel so real? Dude, you nailed this.
That's a really nice thing to say.
What were you? I guess the question is, what were you channeling?
That's just him.
No, it's funny because people really responded. I was in Boston at a birthday party.
Oh,
and I'm going up and saying, this is your town.
You in my house.
And people are like, what are you doing? Mackie, you're messing with my man, Mackie. And my wife would get so upset because I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm not the bad guy.
People get vested in it, and to me, the interesting thing about the arc of Forrest's character is he's a guy who's squeaky clean, really professional, good guy, absolutely a good guy, who in chasing this formidable character gets so completely obsessed and caught up with it that it begins to change the framework of his whole persona. And that was, I think, what attracted you to the role.
That was what was exciting.
And it was just fascinating for us, I think both of us, obviously, to get the feedback from people. I mean, I had people come up to me and literally go, how are you gonna kill him?
And this is cops too, The cops, they love him so much. You're like, why do you hate me?
And it's actually.
No, I learned a real big lesson in point of view about television, because I fully expected people to sort of be torn by, should I root for this guy against Vic or not? And they weren't torn. They were rooting for Vic. And what the lesson to me was that if you present a point of view of a person and you make that person human enough, no matter how much bad stuff they do, people will appreciate and grasp on to that humanity and root for them. And so, I was cataloging the sort of misdeeds that Vic has committed in my head and going, this guy's trying to put him away, and they're talking about him being the villain or him being sadistic, and they start overloading and overdoing the adjectives like sadistic and stuff, when I don't really think that was there, and it certainly was our intention to be there, but because the passion for Vic Mackey is so strong,
when
you start demonizing the enemy.
Yeah, when you wrote that episode where when you were looking at the guy and you think he's dead, and they shoot him, and then you realize he's not dead, he's dying, and he's saying, help me. and you like let him die,
Just let him bleed out.
Colonel Little in the second to
and
last
everybody still like was with you. I was like, okay. I'm the bad guy. But they still were with him, you know, so it's kind of cool.
I've had some officers, or actually retired officers, approach me and say things like the good old days, man. So
That's good.
some of these guys have obviously survived some of this. That's all I'm going to say about it.
How much of this show is inspired or based on things in the news?
The thing that I always tell my writers is that you have a bunch of shows that you know, and certainly 3 shows, the Law and Order shows, that trumpet it, that they rip from the headlines. And so what I'm always telling my writers is that if we're ripping our stories out of the headlines, we're going to be ripping the same stories out of the headlines as every other show, and we're going to start looking like everyone else. So we get some things through anecdotal reading, but they tend to be very obscure things. You know, I saw a program on court TV about a guy in Florida who was raping elderly women, and that kind of became the inspiration for our elderly rapists in season 3. But it certainly wasn't, it was something I saw at 11:30 at night, on a sort of cable channel. It wasn't something that was splashed across the front pages of the paper. So we try to stay away from the big headlines, and we
They make it up.
we use our imagination. We use our imagination as best we can because I am loath. A couple times we've done stories, and I've seen similar storylines done on other shows, and once or twice seen it be on the other show before ours aired, even though we'd already written and shot it, and it drives me crazy. And the best way that I know not to have to see someone do a similar story to you is to come up with it on your own, where it's not out in the universe at all.
Why are there always so long of a hiatuses between each season?
Because we only usually make 13 or 11, or in this case 10, and we try to make them good, and it takes time to do that. And
I suppose you probably set this up, the beauty of that versus if you were doing this show for broadcast.
yeah, FX has a certain amount of money that they can spend on their series, and they want to do 3, 4, 5, 6 series that each have 11 to 13 episodes apiece, and we're happy to churn out that many in any calendar year, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Again, the Sopranos HBO created that model, I think, with doing like between 11 and 15 shows. And I really think it's a brilliant model. Frankly, having worked on network television for a long time, it's a very, very tall order to ask a writing staff to write 22 to 24 hours of television and expect a real high quality for all 22 of those shows. Plus, the intensity of this show is such that, trust me, when we get to the end of that 13 run, we shouldn't be shooting any more shows at that point. We just shouldn't. We're all looking at each other like, hi, can't even think. So, it's best, and plus, say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think, as frustrated as it makes people, and people yell at me all the time, like I set the programming. They're like, why are you gone for 6 months? I'm like, oh, man,
At least we're not gone for 18 months like The Sopranos is sometime. And
Yeah.
we've always tried to come back in a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
With the handheld camera style, do you do a lot of takes or go straight through a scene before cutting? And how many cameras are shooting at any one time?
Michael can probably answer
Yeah,
that best.
we work with a 2-camera setup. We don't even own a dolly, which is amazing. We use something called the skate dolly, which is an invention by Richie Cantu, who's one of our camera operators. We affectionately call it the butt dolly. It's an octagonal piece of wood with heavy-duty hard rubber wheels on it, ball-bearing wheels. And you can sit a camera operator on it and push him around, or you can have it on a pod so that it's more of a dolly feel. But it's very quick on the go, and it accommodates our shooting style. Of course, Clark Johnson set the tone as far as the way we shoot the show, which was very docudrama. And one of the things that he talked about the first day on set is he wanted the camera to be reactive. He didn't want ever to see an operator know that you were going to say a line and go to you in anticipation of you saying the line. He wanted it to be like there was a fifth man in the room, and you start talking and what? Now you're talking, that kind of, so that it gives you that electric, this is happening for the first time feel, and oftentimes it is happening for the first time.
Along those lines, Chick Egley, who is a writer on the show, and he started his career on St. Elsewhere and did LA Law and NYPD Blue, co-created Murder One and Dark Angel. I mean, he's literally like the television historian for us. I'll never forget the first episode that he wrote where he was on set. He came back that day and he came into the writer's room, looked sort of dazed. They said, "Are you all right?" He said, "Yeah, but I just watched Micheal Chiklis run into the middle of an uncontrolled street, winding his way through traffic with Billy the cameraman just following him. And he'd never seen anything like that before, and just came back
right into traffic. Well, you have to understand, we do these, we don't have any lockup. We don't have any budget. So we don't have like this controlled situation, and we probably shouldn't even talk about this, really.
But we found ways to make it work in our advantage. So these scenes feel, more authentic. They feel better. I learned something. I think it was in season 2. Micheal had a very intense scene, and I remember being on the set watching it. I can't remember exactly what the scene was, but when the director's cut came out, I remember there was one take particularly that I really loved, and that take wasn't in there. And I wrote to the editor, I said, no, Micheal had a better take than that, and he's sort of very intense, I want to see that. And the next cut that came, a different take was in, but it wasn't it. And it was driving me crazy because I'd seen it with my eyes. There was a specific thing I was looking for, and then I go in, and my editor was like, no, there's not, I've shown you the best things, nothing else is there. And I said, no, it is there. And I made him run through everything, and I found the take. And the reason why he hadn't used it was in the middle, there was a film problem, where it was as if the sprockets had sort of missed a thread or two, and things got screwed up for a second. And I learned something, which was the best performance matters. I said, put that in. Because if it was a documentary and you were catching a moment happening, you wouldn't throw it out just because a second was sort of screwed up and looking weird.
Forrest, what was it like for you? Did it feel like, I'm not sure about the television that you've done before, did it feel like you just jumped on this fast-moving train?
Well, yeah, I guess, because they all were close. They're a family, and I'm coming in, I'm new, and I think I went to a read-through, and then we just went in and started to do it. So yeah, but that was kind of, I wanted, as an artist, I was looking to try to find something to be fresh and to discover and to not know always what was happening. I mean, and that this experience was allowing me to try out some things too, and they were already in a pocket of something, even though it was always strong for them. They had a pocket, which gives me comfort to be able to explore. It's not like everybody's they're exploring their performances, their characters, they're stretching their characters, but it's all new for me. And so I have the comfort zone of being, amongst people who are linked,
One question I want to ask you, Shawn. This show, the ratings have stayed pretty consistent. It probably could be stronger. Unfortunately, the growth has just hit a plateau, and yet you continually receive, great acclaim from critics, the shout-outs from the awards community. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have a show that does stellar ratings and doesn't necessarily get the love from the press, or what you have now?
I can't complain about what we have now at all. I mean, I kind of feel that our television show is the equivalent of your favorite band in college that that your parents haven't heard of, and a lot of your friends that went to the community college in town haven't heard of, and they make that. It was like, I think being a fan of our show is like being a fan of REM in 1982. Which I was, and you take the sort of pride that there's almost something you like that not everyone is totally into it. Maybe this is rationalization on my part, but I kind of feel like if we had these huge cable ratings that were in need of protection, that maybe we wouldn't take the chances that we take, and that maybe the stories and the characters wouldn't quite be as edgy and interesting. So, this is it.
Oh, I got to say something about ratings because, you know, look, I was on a show called The Commish for 5 years, and that was doing 22 shares on Saturday night. And I could go and get milk, and it wouldn't take me an hour and a half. I have a weird, you know, ratings, I have a real, I don't really have an incredible amount of faith in the rating system. And I have to say, those rating points I don't think account for whole dormitories having Tuesday night Shield nights where there's 100 eyeballs on a single television set, or whole military installations who have begged me to send them DVDs because they sit in a theater and watch the show. I don't think it accounts for those sort of mass audiences that the show sort of, there are Shield parties going on all over the place that I've become aware of only because of the fans. And all I know is that if I had any anonymity before, it's gone.
Because of Vic's obvious and deliberate crimes, are you seeking a last season of full redemption or of operatic revenge? How long can you go without him paying for all his deeds?
You know, what I will say is I don't feel handcuffed that it all has to be about getting Vic Mackey or killing Vic Mackey. Not that those aren't two possibilities. You know, I will just give this hint that one of my all-time favorite movies is Crimes and Misdemeanors, in which Martin Landau sort of, you know, walks away from a murder.
That's a big hint. It can't
Well,
be.
no,
You can't
I'm not
be
saying that that's what we're going to do, but to me, to me, the range that you can work in and be artistically true goes from Martin Landau walking away completely to, you know, to Bonnie and Clyde, you know, death in a hail of gunfire, and there's everything in between. So I don't feel that there's only one ending that can be written, that it's about, or two endings, it's only about redemption or it's only about vengeance. I think there's a lot of little subtle alleyways in between.
That's Shawn's way of saying he doesn't know yet.
So you don't know what do you know what the last scene of the show is? Do you know how the show will end right now?
Well, what I always say is I have ideas and that I give myself always give myself the opportunity to change it. I have in my mind a sort of last image and a last song.
A song. You have the song in your head already.
Yes.
Really?
Obviously,
even
you haven't
know
shared it with him. Is it
I-
pounding
I
or
won't
is it
share
a
with
ballad?
anyone.
If
Tell the
you got a
song, say the song.
secret
They don't
and
know.
I
you
will always
want it
say-
kept, tell him. Because he's good.
Yeah, I will only say that it's a sort of not a very well-known song by a very iconic LA band that I've wanted to have music of theirs on the show for a while, and I never have.
You never have. Oh, no. Do they know this, by the way, this band?
No, if they did, they'd jack up the price. So.
Now, can you tease these two gentlemen? What will we see between the two?
Well, I think that they share something in common going into the season premiere, which is that they want the killer of Curtis Lemonhead Lemansky brought to some kind of justice. Their ideas of justice are probably a little bit different, and their ideas of who's responsible for it are probably a little different.
Well, let's think. Do you feel the show should end soon? Do you feel like it's got another couple years?
You know something? I don't know about a couple of years. I don't know. Yes, I feel that it has legs. I definitely do. I mean, if I felt that it was weakening and that there wasn't a tremendous amount of excitement on set every day, then I wouldn't want to continue with it either, because I think we all are of a mind that we never want it to go beneath a certain bar. It's like, you know, it's our little baby. We want it to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and to see it through to its fruition. I think that we're all committed to that. However, having said that, I still think that it's very, very strong. So yes, I do think we have some stories left to tell. How many that is, I don't know.